Hi, everybody, and welcome to Rank Harvest on this unusually rainy day here in San Diego. So, today's topic is what do the lockdowns mean for website traffic and e commerce in general? It is looking like we're going to be going into round two of lockdowns. Europe has already gone into its phase two of lockdowns, and Joe Biden, who's yet to even be officially announced as president, is already hinting at lockdowns coming here real soon. Now, the lockdowns have a very real economic impact, and there's two concepts that you need to have at least a basic understanding of in order to be able to navigate the right path forward for your business. These two concepts are inflation and deflation. Now, by no means are these the only economic concepts at play, but they're perhaps the two most powerful, and you're going to get yanked back and forth between the two of them. So it's just good to know sort of what they are and what they look like, so you know when you're in one or the other. So we'll start with deflation. The kind of simple definition of deflation is when the prices of goods and services go down. This happens during lockdowns because people are just less active. They're not buying gas. They're not going out to lunch. They're not buying things. This is also because maybe they're a little unsure about their job moving forward. This creates less demand, and it means that vendors and manufacturers necessarily have to lower prices in order to get people to buy. This is the likely first scenario to happen after the lockdowns begin, is deflation. Now, it's not good for business, but it is a good time to start doing SEO. And the reason for this is you need to be prepared for inflation, which is likely to come right after. Inflation, the definition is roughly when the prices of things go up. This is likely to happen because when deflation causes the economy to slow, the government will find ways to inject money into the economy and find just kind of other ways to stimulate commerce. They do things like send out stimulus checks, or you've maybe heard of the concept of negative interest rates. Now, negative interest rates might not affect you directly. It doesn't necessarily mean that the money you have in the bank is going to have negative interest rates applied to it. It may be kind of further upstream. But regardless, it has the effect of making, like, let's say, money easy to borrow. It just makes money easier to have, and it makes money flow. You've also maybe heard of concepts like UBI, Universal Basic Income, and maybe even a digital currency that the Federal Reserve would issue. And what that would look like is perhaps you would have an account at the Federal Reserve, and they would put money into this account, and they might do something like tell you you've got 30 days to spend this money, or we're going to start knocking off 1% per week. And it sort of forces people to start buying again. And this creates demand, and that demand means that manufacturers and vendors can raise prices. And it kind of creates this buying, feeding frenzy. And you need to be positioned for this. You're going to be able to take advantage of this. And it's not to say that inflation doesn't have its other kind of negative influences on you. It's going to cause your own operating costs to go up, among other things. But it is a good opportunity for you to sell into that market and get some revenue in preparation for what might be a deflationary period after that. The reality is that for the next few years, we're probably going to have wild swings of inflation, deflation, lockdown, not locked down, and the winners are going to be those who can emerge in a couple years. First of all, their business not only surviving, well, actually just simply surviving the next 2 years might be all it takes to come out as a winner, because unfortunately a lot of businesses are going to go under over the next couple of years. Now, this is perhaps the most important time in the history of the internet to be doing SEO. And the reason for this is with lockdowns, people are going to be trapped at home and they're going to be spending a lot more time on the internet. Getting in front of these people has never been more important, especially for brick and mortar stores. You're not going to have that walk-in business anymore. It's either you get found in search or you're just not going to have business. That's just the reality of the situation. So starting with the impact on brick and mortar stores, they're going to be moving online in droves. They need to get out of their brick and mortar leases and just start selling online. And this is going to cause them to be buying WordPress sites, Shopify stores, all of that in droves. And all these folks, they know they need SEO. They might not exactly know what SEO means. They just kind of know they need it. And there's kind of a problem here, which is small business owners, especially ones that haven't paid for SEO services in the past, they have unrealistic expectations. They want to be on page one next week for a very low amount of money. It's just really no other way to put it. I can't tell you how many times I've had a small business owner approach me for SEO services, and I give them what is a very fair price of maybe I tell them it's going to be $800 a month for 3 to 6 months to get you on page one. And their response is, well, a guy I talked to last week says that for $100, he'll get me on page one next week. Unfortunately, there's people out there that are willing to sell that type of snake oil. I've almost gotten to the point where I don't even argue that anymore. I just say, look, there's no way I'm going to be able to talk you out of that. Go ahead with that. They just need to learn that lesson early and unfortunately throw money down that pit and then come back to someone who does real SEO services at a fair price. And they just have to learn that lesson. Just tell them to remember your phone number and they'll come back to you at some point. One thing that small business owners do need to understand, and you can help explain this to them, and they generally seem to get it. They don't question that they need SEO. They just question why it costs so much. It pays off in the end. It's an investment. In fact, if they don't do it, their business is probably not going to survive. That's kind of all there is to it. And there's no going back to the way things were before. They're not... In a year from now, they're not going to move back into their brick and mortar store. I mean, people's purchasing habits change quickly. I mean, it only takes a few weeks for someone who used to go to the store for some product who now would rather push a button on their computer and have it delivered to them. It's just the reality of it. Times have changed. Now, what does it mean to, let's say, a more established brand or larger company? For those folks, they're going to be increasing their marketing spend. I should say increasing their digital marketing spend. They're going to be doing things like pulling down their billboards and putting that money into things like SEO. They don't have to be told where their customers' eyeballs are looking. They know it's coming. They know that people are going to be sitting on the couch, shopping on their computer, and not getting in their car anymore. Unfortunately, this is going to have a negative impact on some folks that work in marketing departments at some of these places. As some of these companies start to lose sales, they're going to be laying some folks off, trying to reduce overhead and payroll. And marketing teams are going to be laid off, and they're going to be bringing in outside digital marketing agencies. which again is unfortunate for them, but it's a good time to be a digital marketer as a result. Something else larger companies are going to start doing is going after niche and long tail keywords. Some of the larger companies that maybe before had the luxury of focusing on, let's say, the top 10 or 20 keywords with the highest traffic in their industry, those keywords are going to become even more competitive than they already were. And these companies are going to be going after niche and long tail keywords that some of the smaller businesses had been relying on. There's sort of the table scraps from the larger companies that small business used to be using to drive traffic. Now some of these larger companies are going to want that as well. Something else that's going to happen in kind of the mid to large size company realm is marketing managers are going to have to become experts in SEO. And I don't mean that they're going to have to be experts at executing SEO, but they're going to have to be really good at knowing who to hire and what sort of tactics and strategies work and how SEO fits into kind of a larger marketing strategy. Because they're going to be doing a lot of digital marketing, hiring of people and services soon, and they just have to be able to grasp those concepts well. So what do lockdowns mean for SEO professionals? Well, if we break kind of the SEO professional services world into three categories, there's sort of the big agencies. Let's say companies that have, 10, 20 or more employees. So those might be called kind of the large size SEO agencies. And then you've got the small guys, which are generally maybe a single freelancer who kind of does all the work themselves. And then you got this mid range, which is maybe the 5 to 10 employees. So for those large agencies, they're going to start to have some of the same problems that some of their larger customers are having, which is they're going to be looking for ways to reduce overhead. They're going to have to get their payroll down. The lease on that office that they have is now going to become very expensive. And a lot of these large SEO agencies, they're high volume but low profit margin, and they're not necessarily going to be positioned well for this downturn. They're not agile. They can't pivot and change course, or maybe if they've been focusing on a certain industry that isn't going to do very well during lockdowns and now have to focus on something that is, they're not going to navigate that very well or very quickly. And this also probably isn't going to be a good time for the smaller guy, like the single freelancer. Because frankly, most small one-person SEO shops are small because they're just not good at getting results. And really any business owner that's under a lot of financial strain is going to cut and run from anyone who isn't able to produce results as they were promised. And I just don't see that working out well for sort of the single operator freelance SEO agency. Who this is going to work well for is this kind of mid-size SEO agency, especially the ones that don't even have a central office. Let's say it's 5 or 10 SEO professionals all working remote. They have low overhead, reasonable payroll. They're big enough where they have a good pool of knowledge of SEO, and they're good at getting results. They're agile. They're able to pivot and service clients from a wide variety of industries with a varying range of budgets. Anyone from the small business owner who's only got $500 to spend, all the way up to maybe the mid or large size company who wants to spend $10,000, $20,000 a month in SEO. these mid-size SEO agencies that are really going to thrive in this upcoming environment. So anyway, back to these cycles of inflation and deflation. The one thing we can be certain of in this economic turmoil that we're about to be in, that is a result of the lockdowns, the one thing we can be certain of is things are going to be changing. The world is going to look like a much different place in a year, maybe 2 years from now. And the winners are going to be the people that make the best decisions, make them fast, and are just able to pivot. If you see an opportunity, you go for it. If something's not working, you drop it. There's no dogma. You just pivot and go with it. Sometimes it's intuition. There's no exact recipe. But expecting things to go back to the way they used to be is probably the only way to guarantee that your business isn't going to do well when the dust settles. So that wraps up this video. If you have any questions or feedback, leave them in the comments below. I try to respond to all of them. And thank you for joining.